Hey guys, Steve Moran here with another episode of Tech Tuesday. We had some technical problems going into this. I'm actually in Denver, Colorado at the Work Human Live event. It's an amazing conference all for HR professionals. Adam Grant just finished speaking on the main stage. I'm a huge fan. You'll see some articles coming out of that. I've got Seth Bornstein with me with Kemtai, and we're going to have a conversation about some really cool technology. But first, this. Hey guys, Steve Moran here. Seth, welcome. Let's start by talking about who you are and what you do.
Sure thing, Steve. Great to meet you. Thanks for having me on here. As you've already introduced, my name is Seth Bornstein. I am the Director of Product in the US for Kemtai. And we are, just telling you a little bit about Kemtai generally, we are the world's first digital physical therapist. So Kemtai provides real-time feedback and corrective guidance using computer vision technology to patients around the world from any device with a camera. So your phone, your tablet, your laptop, you name it, Kemtai can run it and actually provide scalable physical therapy to patients wherever they may be, from the comfort of their own homes, doing digital assessments as well, captures performance data, adherence data, actually drives stronger adherence data, which obviously is kind of the cornerstone of successful physical therapy, and gives all of that data back to clinicians so that they can see what's usually a black hole, exactly what these patients are doing at home.
So is this, where do I want to start with this? So who benefits from the most from it?
So we can look at that question from a couple of different perspectives, right? So first and foremost, the patient, right? That's what's most important to us. Patients today, when they're doing physical therapy, there are challenges from a variety of perspectives. One, physical therapy is not the most accessible thing for patients right now. Oftentimes they need to drive into a physical location. Sometimes those can be far away, especially if these patients are in rural locations. It's often inconvenient or physically challenging to get into those actual offices. And it's also, so one, we make sure that it's easier for patients to access physical therapy. And then two, when patients are doing their physical therapy at home or inside of, I know we're talking about the senior living community, if they're doing it inside of a senior living home or under supervision of care, it can be challenging to understand whether they're doing their exercises correctly. And so the beauty of Kemtai is that not only does it make physical therapy more accessible, it also guides patients as they're doing their movements, their exercises, their assessments. It literally watches them and talks to them and says, hey, don't bend your arm like that. Don't bend your knees so much. And it tells them if they're doing something incorrectly so that they can feel comfortable knowing that they're doing their exercises, one, correctly, and two, safely at home. So it benefits patients significantly from that perspective.
Okay, now, so let me try a couple of examples for you, because they're very personal. So my wife had her hip replaced about 6 weeks ago, and she had physical therapy. They came and did an assessment, I think the day of her surgery or the day after, and then maybe 4 more visits after that. And they recommended some exercises, and she did pretty good on that, but not great. So would your system be there to sort of, I don't know, not make her, but encourage her to do it every day?
Yes. So Kemtai provides benefits that you're kind of touching on the need for from a couple different perspectives. One, it's a much more engaging solution for patients. Meaning, one, they get feedback on making sure that they're doing the exercises correctly, which is a big pain point for people doing their home exercise protocols. They don't know if they're doing them right. And so when they're getting that feedback, it's much more reassuring to the patient that they're doing things correctly, right? So that's one. Two, is this accountability that Kemtai drives, right? And so patients, your wife would know that her clinician can see exactly what she's doing at home. And so there's this two-way accountability of, because you know that you're accountable to your clinician or your physical therapist, you can't go to that person and say, hey, I did my exercises, because they know exactly what you did. If you didn't do your exercises, they know you didn't do your exercises. So one, it's engaging, it's providing the feedback and guidance, which is inherently more engaging for a patient. And then two, it's driving accountability, because the clinicians get insight to exactly what patients are doing at home, not just if they logged in, but actually if they exercised, if they did an assessment, and what it actually looked like. And so those are kind of the two components. As one, it's engaging, it's, it's gratifying to the patient to see how they're improving. And two, it drives that accountability as well. And so the adherence that we see is dramatically higher than that of traditional physical therapy, where, say, you hand someone a piece of paper and say, go home and do these exercises. So that's a key difference, is the adherence that we drive compared to your traditional PT.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this, because I think about, I've had a few times where I had to do some PT for an injury or something, and it's really hard to do, because I get this piece of paper and I try to remember what the therapist told me, and then I try to do it and it feels awkward and stupid, and so I end up not doing it. And so far I haven't had to pay a big price for that. But the other thing that I'm thinking is that if I were working with residents in a senior living community and they have PT visits plus things they're supposed to do on their own that a caregiver should be helping them with, that's really tough to do. And this really solves that problem, right?
That's right. And so the senior living realm is one that we're working in as well, specifically. And so that use case looks a little bit different than traditional physical therapy, right? Like you said, a lot of times there's residents that are in homes. The use case that comes to mind for me is with a hospital called Beit Balev in Israel that we're working with. And we're working with them on two different things. One is we're doing some research around fall risk. And so Kemtai can do assessments. And so we're looking at sit to stand assessment and using that in research to assess fall risk for their patients, and ultimately looking at the impacts, right, of using Kemtai and how that is able to drive more favorable or lower fall risk. And so that's one area where we're able to play, is because Kemtai has over 2,000 different exercises. And so in this case, it's a sort of rehab hospital for older patients that are recovering from surgeries or certain health events, and we're able to support their research there, looking at fall risk specifically. So that's more on the academic or research side. On the clinical side, we're actually doing the physical therapy and rehabilitation for these patients. And what that looks like is, traditionally in hospitals, not just there, but around the world, there's a limited number of resources and time that can be used to provide physical therapy to patients in the inpatient or in the inpatient rehab hospital setting. And so the key is, a lot of times these organizations have realized that if patients can be exercising more or doing more physical therapy or rehab, it can make sure their recovery is quicker, it can reduce length of stay. There's a variety of different reasons why, from both a clinical perspective and a business case perspective, why that's beneficial. But what we're doing is supporting their patients to get them exercising more in these facilities and still getting the feedback and the guidance that they would get from a physical therapist working directly with them, in order to improve those outcomes for those patients and have them exercising more and get them on their way and back to living their lives as they want to be living more quickly. And so that's the clinical use case that we're seeing in that setting, for example.
So I just want to get to a couple of details. Does somebody need a physician's order or referral to do this?
So generally speaking, Kemtai is partnered with clinical organizations, whether they're doctors or physical therapists, that are doing the actual prescribing of the exercises or the assessments or the protocols to patients. So Kemtai, like I said, we have over 2,000 different exercises that range from a variety of, positions, equipment, types of conditions, different goals, and we have a bunch of different assessments as well. You can use those to create care plans. Kemtai, we have a clinical team in-house. A lot of times we'll develop care plans for patients that walk them through the journey we're not the ones that are providing care to organizations' patients. We believe in continuity of care. We want the organizations to be the ones that are making the prescriptions to patients, that are, monitoring the patients, making sure that they're recovering as they should be. And so, yes, it's the clinical teams of our partners that are doing the prescription of exercises and the prescription of care plans and assessments to their patients. We're the enabling technology that powers this through care plans, including, like I said, exercising, range of motion assessments, educational material, forms, questionnaires, patient-reported outcomes data, all of that within the Kemtai capability. And then it's the clinical partners that are doing the prescription to patients specifically.
Okay, so I sort of want to go two different directions with you next. And let me tell you about I think the second direction I want to go. But I'm looking at this and I'm thinking this could be such a powerful tool to use for just an activity, exercise, strengthening that would become part of the life enrichment program rather than necessarily medical. Is that possible?
Of course, yes. That's a use case that we're seeing as well, kind of in, you could call it the medical wellness space or the chronic condition management space as well. And so we're seeing use cases pop up more and more, and we're getting pulled in more and more to use cases in the obesity space, in the diabetes space, in just the general wellness space. And so there's a variety of ways, one, there's a variety of conditions or use cases that Kemtai is relevant for. And two, there's a variety of ways to enable it. So what I was just describing is kind of the one-to-one clinician-patient relationship where a patient's going through rehabilitation with supervised by a clinician of some sort. There's also some use cases that we've seen where it's completely self-service for patients, where, it's more of a wellness perspective and there's, 5 or 10 or 20 different pathways that are relevant, and the patient gets assigned one, or the patient chooses one that's most relevant to them. And they go through more of a wellness or exercising journey to make sure that they're doing their exercises correctly and tracking themselves. And coaches or clinicians can also track those patients in line with that. And so it's a different use case that we see as well. The technology, though, of course, can support that sort of use case.
Gotcha. But it's a one-on-one. It's not. And maybe that's sort of where I should go next is talk to me a little. Let's talk a little bit about the specifics about how it works.
Yeah. So the way Kemtai works is using computer vision technology. Okay. And so typically it's most beneficial to show it. I'm not sure if on streaming now it might be a little bit challenging. So I'll just describe it. And then for everyone watching, if you're curious, of course, you can check it out on our website, which I'm sure will be shared with you all. But Kemtai has the strongest computer vision technology in the market by far. Few things. One, it tracks over 111 different points. It tracks 111 points on the body, meaning it sees, rotations of joints. It sees all the different points extremely accurately. This was recently compared to a 3D motion lab that has 10 different 3D cameras. It takes 30 minutes to put sensors on patients. And we found through this study that was conducted that Kemtai is basically just as accurate as those super capital intensive solutions. And so that technology is what powers Kemtai. It watches patients move in real time. It never records any video at all. All the processing actually happens on the edge device. And the edge device can be a phone, a tablet, a laptop, any of the devices that are in patients' pockets, generally speaking, that have cameras can run Kemtai. Like I said, it watches you move. It compares your movements to what you're supposed to be doing. And through that, it knows how to correct what you're doing. And so if you bend your knees too much, it'll correct you. If it needs to measure the angle of a specific joint, it'll measure it. And because the technology is so strong that we're able to support the treatment for so many different conditions, because we have over 2,000 different exercises and variations of exercises, ones that are well suited for the older adult population as well. And so that's the technology that's running behind the scenes as patients are doing their physical therapy.
This is great. I want to put that, leave that question up. So one of the things I'm thinking is, again, in my own use cases, my viewers know I've got my 92-year-old stepfather who's got significant cognitive loss. and he's had a little bit of PT, but we have not been able to get him to comply, and so we gave up. But I think Michael asked this great question: can this be used? Are you seeing it used in memory care, in the memory care space?
Not so much. So frankly, that's not necessarily a focus area of ours. The use cases that we see for Kemtai are more within the physical rehabilitation or exercising space. Those span a variety of conditions, right? Musculoskeletal care for your basic musculoskeletal conditions like low back pain, neck pain, joint replacements, through neurological rehabilitation for things like Parkinson's or brain injury or stroke. But on the memory side of things, it's really, one, not our core competency, and two, it's just not a use case that we have focused on.
Well, I guess from my perspective, and Michael, I'm not sure. I'm gonna assume something here, and it may not be right. That the question was more about, because you instruct somebody with cognitive decline, that they forget what to do, and so this just becomes a coach for them more in physical wellness. Maybe Michael's looking at it in terms of helping memory, but I'm sort of, that's not how I read it. So
from that perspective, a lot of times people are asking us questions. I understand how this would work for a 25-year-old, but how does it work with the older adult population? And one of those things might be cognitive decline, or just general, like, less tech savviness of that population. Because Kemtai literally talks to you and it shows you visually how to correct your movement, and it tells you what you're doing incorrectly, it tends to be super intuitive. It's a nascent technology space, regardless of, if you're an 18-year-old using it because you sprained your ankle, or a 75-year-old that just got a joint replacement. Computer vision is a pretty new space, right? And so we've spent a lot of time on the onboarding to make sure that people understand how the technology works, and to make sure that they are able to get those first 1 or 2 sessions running properly. But once that occurs, we see with the older adult population that they're off to the races. We're doing a pilot right now with a large health system on the West Coast, and I am always, not surprised, because I know the strength of the technology, but super pleased to look and see, these 75, 80-year-old patients that just received joint replacements, pumping out their squats and their lunges after doing their post-op rehab. They not only do they figure it out, they enjoy it a lot. And some of our most adherent patients is that older population. And so, of course, if someone has severe cognitive decline, they're not going to be able to complete Kemtai or really any sort of rehabilitation on their own, for that matter. But for just the older population in general, we found that those are some of our strongest patients.
Yeah, I guess the use case I would see is, again, looking at my stepfather, is with his PT, it would be me getting the system set up, saying, "Hey, Gary, time to do your PT. Here it is," putting it in front of him, and that I could see this as being a really, really powerful way that would to help with that. So I'm a senior living operator. I'm watching this and I'm thinking, this could be pretty cool for my community, for my organization. What does it look like to get started? And actually, before I go there, how does it get paid for?
Yeah. So we are a B2B business, meaning we work with mostly enterprise level organizations, and a variety of different types of them. So 1, health systems and hospitals. 2, we're starting to work more with the payers specifically. And then we also work with digital platforms that integrate our technology into their own platforms, which is probably less relevant for this conversation, but just for the sake of being comprehensive, those are kind of the organizations that we look at, and they pay for licenses of using Kemtai, and then they're able to serve it to their patients. The business case depends on the organization. Some of them are looking for cost savings. Some of them are looking for outcomes improvement. Some of them are looking for, a new way of driving revenue. There's a variety of different business cases for Kemtai, but Kemtai provides a subscription-based license, and then those organizations that are Kemtai customers can serve it to their patients. The beauty of Kemtai is that we're a software-only solution. We are completely scalable. There's no hardware that we're dependent on, so our business model itself can be quite flexible. Whether it's an annual subscription or a PMPM model, we've explored all of these different models because we're able to.
So I could, if I were a senior living operator, I could reach out to you and you could at least potentially sell this to me as an operator, and then I'd make it available to my residents. Is that fair?
That's right. That's exactly the use case with the rehab facility that I mentioned earlier as we were discussing. That's exactly the model that we're.
And then would I still need to plug in either my physician, my clinical team, or a physical therapy company to make this work?
So generally, Kemtai is at its strongest when there's clinical buy-in on the partnering organization and when there are people that are, monitoring these patients on the ground and prescribing the care plans to patients. And so whether those are in-house clinicians or it's a physical therapy organization that you partner with, the key is having, an authority figure that the patients are respecting and looking to for guidance, that are emphasizing and guiding them to use Kemtai versus just with any solution, right? If you say, hey, go ahead and run with this and see how it works, regardless of what type of patient population you're dealing with, you're going to see less uptake than if you have buy-in on the clinical side within organizations.
Yeah. Yeah, I just there are so many senior living operators right now who are really focused on creating more wellness in their communities. And I was at a conference a few months ago where the CEO was telling me this story about an individual who'd moved into his community and was not mobile. And they worked on diet and exercise and this kind of thing. And she got to the point where she could walk unassisted all the way down to the end of the corridor and back. And that was a big, big win. And so I'm just thinking if something like this could be so powerful as an adjunct, it would be, it would solve real problems or make people's lives better. But in addition to that, it would become a very powerful marketing tool. This may be a completely off the wall reference, right? But there are all these companies that have these golf simulator things that can help you with your golf swing. And it sort of seems a little bit like that.
Yeah. I get asked that question all the time at events. Can I use this for my golf swing? Right now we're focused in the healthcare space, but I will say, that's a use case that I'm super excited about. Personally, I think it's a super interesting one. And so as Kemtai continues to grow, I'm sure that we'll be exploring spaces like that. For now, we're pretty hyper-focused on healthcare.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing I'm thinking, and again, it would be probably a futures for you, and it may not be where you want to go because it's pretty competitive, but it sounds like your camera technology is so sophisticated that it could be a really, really good fall detection. It could be used for fall detection as well and be very effective in that way.
Yeah, it's another interesting space, of course. We're not doing anything in the ambient monitoring space right now. A lot of those solutions, as you know, right now are hardware-based solutions that are getting installed into either homes or hospital rooms. We're more focused on the exercise and assessment piece of using, any device, household device that are in the pockets or on the desks of patients. So ambient monitoring is not something that we're doing right now. Could be something that we move into more and more, but it's not an offering that we have right now, just to be completely transparent.
Well, it sounds like you've got lots of directions you can go with this and lots of room to run on this. Talk to me a little bit about the user experience and what it's like for somebody to actually use it.
Yeah, so we minimize friction for patients as much as possible. And on the clinician side, we streamline everything as much as possible to make the one, assignment of protocols and care plans as simple as possible, and two, the monitoring of patients as simple as possible. I'll start on the patient side. There's no downloads of our end-to-end solution that are necessary. It's all web-based. And so the way that this works is a patient gets assigned a care plan. They receive either a text message, an SMS, or an email that their care plan's ready for them. They follow the link. They authenticate in, and everything that they're supposed to do on that specific day is waiting for them. They can view their care plan. They can see the different activities they have to do. And once they complete the activities that they're supposed to do for that day, they disappear, right? So the patient only sees what they're supposed to do in a very intuitive, simple, patient-facing platform. On the clinician side, there is, obviously a large variety of capabilities. There's a few main areas that I'll touch on. One is the ability to create care plans for patients. You can either create these as templates, which we have a bunch that we've created in-house, say for lower back pain or for, total knee arthroplasty. that can just be assigned to patients out of the box, depending on what surgery or what condition they have. And there's no customization that's necessary. Of course, you can tweak to care plans a little bit and say, oh, this patient has XYZ comorbidity, so we're going to twist it a little bit and adjust this exercise to make it seated. Whatever the tweaks are, you can do, but you can have these predefined templates, or you can create things completely from scratch and assign them to patients. Like I said, our library has over 2,000 exercises. You select from those, you select from all of our range of motion assessments. You build a care plan that's dynamic. So it walks patients through the recovery journey. Start with this education, then do these exercises for 3 days. After you've been adherent and compliant with those, it's going to dynamically jump to the weeks 1 through 3 set of exercises. And hey, all at the same time, go ahead and do a range of motion assessment once a week. All of that is configurable within the clinician side of the platform. And then the second piece of the clinician side of the platform is the actual review of what patients are doing. A huge challenge in the physical therapy space is understanding what patients are doing when there's not a clinician that's around. Kemtai allows clinicians to asynchronously review exactly what patients have done because we capture the spatial coordinates of the patient's skeleton. So they can replay exactly what the movement looked like without needing to record any video at all. And they can see over time how scores improve, how range of motion improves, how adherent patients are. And they're able to see that through simple dashboards for each individual patient and at a high level for their entire clinic or their entire patient population.
So how long is a typical session?
Typical session of, that can include like just exercises, generally, 15, 20 minutes of actual exercises that patients do. Of course, that depends on the clinical recommendations and expertise that's being built by our clinicians. And also, Kemtai doesn't include just exercises. It's assessments for range of motion, for example. It's educational material that they read through. It's forms, things like promise forms for patient-reported outcomes that patients can review. And so the session length can vary based on what's been assigned to that patient. Generally, you don't want to have 2-hour-long sessions where patients are exercising for 2 hours because it's taxing, and you want to make sure you're focusing on what's what's the highest priority for patients. And so we don't recommend having several hour-long sessions for patients, but they can vary a bit.
Great. Okay, perfect. So does it gamify it? So at the end of my session, do I get a score that says, I got it, I did my exercises 100% right, or I did it 50% right, or how does that work?
Yeah, it's not just after the session, it's during the session. So Kemtai it's partially gamified to the extent that for each repetition, you see your score. You see if it's more of a static exercise, how your score is fluctuating as you're doing the exercise. And it's visual. So if you do a rep really well, then the color of the score will be green, for example. And so it's a very simple feedback loop of understanding how you're doing and then making the correction and seeing how that changes your performance. And then you get summaries of each exercise, you get summaries of each session, you get an overall score for the session. And then, another awesome thing is that you can see how the scoring is changing over time. So you can see how you've actually improved, not just within a session, but between sessions and as your recovery progresses.
And the other thing I was thinking about is does the system have the ability to watch and say, oops, that's not quite the right exercise or movement, you should do this instead, or recommend something different to the clinician?
Yeah. So we're not right now in a space where we're making clinical recommendations for patients. We're leaving that to our tech or to our clinical partners. So we're more of you could think of us more as a technical platform than a clinical platform. Of course, Kemtai is correcting. If you assign a patient an exercise to do and the patient does it incorrectly, Kemtai is going to correct them to make sure that they're doing their exercise just like the ideal version of the exercise that they've been assigned. It's not going to push them past what they're supposed to do. It's going to make sure that they're doing exactly what was assigned to them by their clinician. Now, looking forward, when we talk about our roadmap, what you're getting at is definitely something that we're pursuing because there's going to be a whole host of data available that we're using as our patient population grows And we can start to make recommendations based off of that data, ideally. What I'm talking about is the idea of having a patient come in and, let's say this is a 75-year-old female patient that also has diabetes that just got a knee replacement. Kemtai might have all of the data available to say, based on the conditions and comorbidities and medical history of this patient, it's 90% likely that this care plan will be the most impactful for their recovery, and recommend those to clinicians. We're not doing that right now, but it's definitely something on our roadmap that we are interested in pursuing.
Well, yeah, I love that. And the other use case I was sort of thinking is that you know this world better than I do, but I assume there are times when a clinician recommends some sort of a treatment, and the individual just simply can't. They try it and they just can't do it, and they need to do something else that's either different or more basic or something like that.
Right. So the clinician gets access to all of the data on what the patients are doing, and that's what enables them to make informed clinical decisions, modify care plans, make them more difficult, make them a bit more easy. All of that is, enabled by the data that is provided to them through Kemtai.
Cool. And Jada, let's put up that comment that Michael dropped in. I think that's there's some wisdom in that, and just about positioning and the exercise for seniors is often not very appealing. And I would completely agree with that, we're spending more time thinking about language and those kinds of things. So just for whatever that's worth. But yeah. I think it makes sense to me.
I think it's an interesting perspective. And I've seen that sentiment echoed. We're part of, for example, AARP's Age Tech Collaborative, and they're in alignment as well as we are with that perspective on the aging population. I will say for Kemtai specifically, we're not a direct-to-consumer solution. So it's not like we're marketing directly to the senior population or the older adult population. We're working with the organizations that serve them, whether it's rehab facilities, whether it's physical therapy organizations, whether it's health systems, hospitals, payers, and they're the ones that are serving it to their patients. And so in the messaging that comes from them through partnership with us, of course, it's an interesting, it's a perspective that we should keep in mind.
You bet. Seth, thank you very much. We're about out of time here. I appreciate this. I just am continually amazed at what we're seeing new technology do to make human beings' lives better. So appreciate you joining me. Appreciate your passion for what you're doing.
Thanks, Steve. Great to see you again. Thanks for having me.